There are only 17 albums that Anthony Fantano has given a 0 out of 10, and I'm going to be listening to every single one of them, starting with I'm Gay.
Hey, we got 18 albums to listen to, and I have listened to the first 5. And let me just say, someone send help. First album, I'm Gay by Lil B. Now, don't kill me, but this album wasn't that bad. The production was actually pretty good. It was mellow for most of the part. It wasn't painful to listen to. It was like soft and there were a lot of pitched up like chipmunk samples, which were actually really nice. And honestly, the soundscape of this album was good. On the other hand, Lil B himself, his lyrical subject matter was pretty bad. Just the lyrics, they didn't really have much behind them. It was just kind of a collection of words. It's not all awful because there are like some tracks where the lyrics are actually like good. On the song The Wilderness, for example, where he says, "And why is college so expensive?" That shit hit me right in the chest. Then he also says, "This is one life to live and I'ma live it. Fuck the critics. I'm happy. Lil Boss." He's already calling out the critics in this one too, so it's kind of funny how this album was given a 0 by Anthony Fantano. And if you don't know who Anthony Fantano is,
hi, me again. Here's what's going on. Following the formula of my last video, I created the Smile system, which is definitely not a 1 to 5 ranking system. It's definitely not. I'm personally not a fan of ranking art in a numerical scale, which is what the music critic Anthony Fantano is known for doing. So for every album that he's given a 0 out of 10, which is the worst review that an album can get, I decided that I would listen to every single 0 out of 10 and try and maybe redeem them. See if they're really as bad as Anthony Fantano said.
his subject matter on this album too goes into love a lot and just living your life and opening up your mind and being free, which is all good, and it's all stuff that I kind of agree with, and I think, yeah, why not talk about this? It's great. He just kind of sounds pretty bored, though, through his delivery, I will admit.
I'm working for the future, cause I live in a computer.
In my mind, the best tracks were The Game, The Wilderness, Get It While It's Hot, and I've Seen That Light. Those songs were actually pretty enjoyable to me. One thing about music for me is, like, I don't give a shit about the lyrics. It's more about the feeling that I get from the music and how it makes me feel and the experience from listening to it. So you could be saying whatever the hell you want. Like, as long as the beat's good and it just sounds good to my ears, then I do not care. What's also funny is I looked at the albums that Lil B is on, and he's on this album called Resurrection, and on one of the tracks is Danny Gonzalez. So you're telling me Danny Gonzalez is on the same project as Lil B? Like, that's insane. This may be bonkers to you, but I did not hate this album. In fact, I thought it was actually pretty good, and I would re-listen to this. Sure, the lyrics weren't the best, but I don't care. I'm giving this a green smiley face. Okay, next. This was a really weird one. It was an album that was given a 0 out of 10, but also a 10 out of 10? All Love's Legal by Planning to Rock. Anthony Fantano, as an April Fool's joke, reviewed this album 2 times. In the first review, he gives it a 0 out of 10, and then in the second, he gives it a 10, which left a lot of people confused. So I thought I would just listen to it anyway, because technically he did give it a 0, so I did, and I can understand the 0. The lyrics are great, and the subject matter is great. It's all about how everyone should be able to love whoever they want, and all love should be legal. The lyrics are very, like, Playboy Cardi, kind of just very repetitive. The production is very slow. It's not very enjoyable. It's quite boring and mellow for the most part, which I wasn't a fan of. Some of it just kind of dragged on. These nuts. Thank you. One song I really did like, though, was Let's Talk About Gender. That song was great because it was really upbeat, fast-paced, and groovy. But overall, I didn't get any enjoyment, really, except for that track out of this album. The biggest peeve to me with music is if a song is boring or underwhelming or it drags on. That shit sucks. So honestly, I would just give this one a bad smiley face and move on to Speeding Bullet to Heaven by Kid Cudi. Why do I put myself through this shit? This album is an hour and a half long. and it should not be. A lot of it feels dragged out, which I hate, and a lot of it could be so much shorter. And there are also these skits at the end, I think it's Beavis and Butthead or something, and it's just the most annoying shit you'll ever hear. Like, they go on for like minutes of just them talking and going, It's like, shut up. Sometimes the vocals were really distorted and hard to hear, and then other times it was only the vocals you could hear, really. The lyrics, too, were really shit and just not interesting at all. Like this one, for example, her vagina is moist and warm. Gross. Like I said, the skits are bad. They add absolutely nothing to the album at all. Unlike an MF Doom project where the skits kind of amplify the album and give some sort of background and world building to it, these just felt unnecessary and dumb. Some of the tracks that I did like, though, were the more laid-back acoustic versions, like the acoustic version of the title track. That was, I think, the only track where I very much enjoyed the song. I liked more of the back end of the album, I would say. Like, it grew on me a little bit, but it was just boring. There's a bad smiley face. Yeah. Next up is Graveyard Classics IV, Number of the Priest by 6 Feet Under. I don't even know where to start with this one. This is kind of like a heavy metal, like screamo kind of album is the best way I can describe it. Unlike bands that I do actually like, which is screamo like Death Heaven, the guy's voice in this is absolutely painful to listen to. It's really deep and gravelly, but just different to the lead singer from Death Heaven because it's just, there's no emotion in it whatsoever. It sounds like if like Satan were to do an impression of himself. I couldn't understand like half of what the guy was saying, and what I could understand kind of just sucked. This is so bad. I hate this video. So Fantano actually never reviewed this album, but on his worst albums of the decade video, he put this at number 4, which means it was higher than a lot of albums that he did give a 0. So I'm counting it anyway. There was some guitar solos that were okay, like on the song Starbreaker, like it actually made me cackle a bit because it was just so funny. The only thing that I enjoyed about this album was how bad it was, and it just made me laugh because some of the tracks are so stereotypically bad and funny, and the voice is so terrible. It's like, yeah, if you're with a group of friends and you need to put on something that would make them piss their pants laughing, then put on this album because it's like, it's hideous. At least this album wasn't boring, it didn't drag on, and it wasn't an hour and a half long. So I'll give it a bad smiley face. And the final album I just listened to is Corey Feldman, Angelic to the Core. Fantano literally said that this was the worst album of the 2010s. And I think I agree. What's funny to me about this album is he probably thought the shit was so good when he was making it. He was probably just like, man, I'm making some real good shit right now. This is gonna be fire. Let's post it. Did I just get a 0 out of 10? Like, I can't even describe how this sounds. It just sounds like shit. The whole thing, it was just terrible. It was an hour and a half too, which, stop it. The song Bad People wasn't that bad except for the last 3 seconds when I think there was like a car crash or something. He cannot sing for shit either. It's really funny. I think he's an actor and he was on the Goonies. So he really, his career really went uphill with this one. But the production, I mean, it's not half bad. A lot of it is, but some tracks I was like, it's okay, it's listenable for the most part. The song Everybody was actually pretty good, and I think that was the highlight of the album, but then the song after it, Lickety Splickety, was probably the worst song I've ever heard. Then, this surprised the shit out of me. This was really insane. The song Go For It had a feature by Snoop Dogg. This is probably the worst EDM song of all time. It's really just really pinches at your eardrums, man. It's not good. I was listening to this just before trying to do schoolwork, and I literally could not focus at all on my schoolwork. I had to just sit back and just relish in how terrible this was. Even with the highlights on this album, I don't think I would ever want to put myself through this thing again. So it's an awful, awful smiley face. We've got a lot of albums to go, and I'm just not happy about any of this. Why did you want me to do this video? Why? I'm back, and I've listened to 3 new records. The first one being Total Xanarchy by Lil Xan. Lil Xan's like a rapper who's white. So Fantano actually gave this a not good review, and if you don't know what that is, I'll fill you in. A not good review means the album is so like terrible that it's not even worth criticizing the material itself. These albums were never meant to be like taken seriously or were made with the purpose of actually being good music. Although the reason why I am listening to this album and why it's on this list is because it became the #2 worst album of the 2010s, according to Anthony Fantano. This even ended up beating Speeding Bullet to Heaven by Kid Cudi, which he gave a 0 out of 10. So I think it's only fair that it's on this list. Lil Xan's delivery is very monotone and boring. He sounds like he doesn't want to be there on his own songs. Xans don't make you, Xans don't break you. Then there's the production of the tracks, which isn't that bad. It's in that kind of SoundCloud era, like Trapt music, where it's just heavy hitting beats, and it doesn't sound too bad. If you can get over the lyrics, the production is just completely alright. The subject matter, on the other hand, kind of sucks. It's just all about sex and just, you know, banging bitches and getting a wee sucked and boing boing. There's one lyric that stood out to me. All my bitches fuck with bitches, all my bitches love my bitches. That's a real lyric by a real artist. And then the features on this album are kind of crazy because you've got T-Pain and he's doing his thing. He sounds okay. But you've also got Charlie XCX, which was a huge surprise because she had got the coveted 10 out of 10 score by Fantano for her album Brat. And then I went from listening to her on that and loving that album to hearing her on this, and I was like, what is going on? Like, it was alright. She killed it, sure. She didn't do bad, but I was just, the pairing of these two, it was weird. Specifically, songs like Shine Hard were just really repetitive and just really hurt my brain. Then there were some songs like around the end of the album that had millions, hundreds of millions of streams. The song Betrayed has like 600 million. There was the one after that, which I was like, holy shit, I've heard the song so many times that I never knew who it was. So I guess this album did kind of blow up and it got Lil Xan pretty popular, but I didn't know much about him. Can I just talk about this album cover because it is the most disturbing thing I've ever seen. Then the second to last track of the album was a huge surprise and really strange because Diplo comes in and produces this EDM house beat and Lil Xan's just like, yeah, bad smiley face. Then an artist that I have heard a lot about, but I never heard any of his albums before, so this was the first one. Chance the Rapper, The Big Day. I've never listened to Chance before, but I've heard a lot of good things about his first few albums or mixtapes, whatever they are. A lot of people telling me, you have to listen to this, you have to listen to Chance the Rapper, but ignore The Big Day. And I'm like, why? So I listened to it, and I gotta say, impressed. Hear me out, because the first few tracks were really upbeat, really fun. I enjoyed them quite a bit. Just good vibes, honestly, from the first few tracks. And then we got into Hot Shower, which has 200 million streams. This song sucks ass. It's boring, it's repetitive, the baby's on it, and it just sucks. But my favorite song on the album, for sure, was I Got You. That song is just, it's just so great. It's so good. Then a lyric that really stood out to me was peanut butter jelly with a baseball bat. The meme from like 2008. Then the album does kind of go on a bit. It's like an hour and 17 minutes and the ending is just very generic songs and wedding music. I think this was kind of the theme of his album, was that he loves his wife. This guy loves his wife more than Borat, like holy shit. But to be honest, I have no idea why Fantano gave this a 0 out of 10. It's clearly not a 0 out of 10. It's not that bad. It's not a horrible album by any means at all. It's no Angelic to the core. This is just a medium smiley face. Like, it wasn't the worst thing I ever heard, and it wasn't the best thing I ever heard, but it wasn't bad by any means necessary. Supermarket by Logic. I'm gonna raise my hands up to the roof and dance, and just to say that I've never heard a Logic album before, so don't kill me. A lot of you were confused about what I even listened to, and I'm just gonna say, these are my favorite albums, these are my favorite bands, this is just what I like to listen to when I'm alone, this is what I like to listen to get turned up, and this is what I like to listen to when I'm having sex. So I hope that gives a good broad representation of my music taste. So this album isn't a 0, this is another not good, but the reason that this guy put us on this list is because Fantano said that this was worse than Speeding Bullet to Heaven, which he gave a 0. So this then is also a 0, like it's confusing, okay? The first track was pretty cool. It was very upbeat, very 80s, and it It didn't sound bad at all. Track 2 comes in and it kind of samples the Can I Kick It by a Tribe Called Quest kind of lyric bit there, and it's not a bad track. But for most of it, it just kind of sounds like generic white people music, like what they play on Toyota ads when the guy's driving the car. The song Best Friend specifically was very boring and generic, and it just had the playing guitar, the acoustic, but it's not as good as the Kid Cudi one. It was just very boring, and his delivery was flat, and the lyrics just sucked. But my favorite lyric has got to be on the song Lemon Drop, where Logic says, "Get litty, get gritty, Rick Sanchez, get swifty." Well, this album was definitely not good. It wasn't underwhelming because I was expecting this to be a 0. So maybe for that fact, I'm going into these albums thinking they're a lot worse than they actually are. Yeah, I'm just gonna give this one a medium smiley face. 9 albums to go!
Okay, so I've listened to 3 more albums, and they were interesting. The first of those 3 was Nostalgia Critic's The Wall. All I know about Nostalgia Critic is that he's a YouTuber who critiques movies and TV, so first of all, I was confused as to why he made an album, but YouTubers do that sometimes, and it always goes well. So I was like, well, this has gotta be good. So Fantano didn't give this a 10, but he put it as the 3rd worst album of the 2010s. So this is worse than a few albums that he gave a 0 out of 10. So it's pretty bad. Basically, it's bad rock music, and the vocals, the harmonies are absolutely terrible. No, don't go. These were the recommended songs that I got under this album. So you know that the album kind of sucks. Some songs are literally just interludes into the next one, which I'm usually fine with, but they were just made to stretch out the album, like the song after this one is really good. So the concept and like the cover of this album is a parody of Pink Floyd's album The Wall, but I think Nostalgia Critic just did a take on a few songs, like the song We Need More Victims, which is a cover of Leave Them Kids Alone, but it's changed up and it's bad and it's a lot worse. The song Fennel's The Trial is probably the worst, most pointless song I've ever listened to. I got absolutely no enjoyment out of that entire 5-minute song. The only good track is the final track, and it's a 40-second long song covering the SpongeBob theme song. I took a shit while I was listening to this, and that sounded better than this album. It's a bad smiley face. The next album is Green Day's Father of All. This is just straight up generic radio rock, it's really bad, and it's just rock that you would hear on the radio that is meant for just the most boring people in the world. It's just generic bad rock music, but it's not painful to listen to. It's not awful. It's just very bland and uninteresting, and it just kind of sounds like shit. The lyrics too are very dry and just shitty. I've also never listened to any Green Day albums before. I've probably heard a few songs, but this is the first, and hopefully it gets a lot better from here. This wasn't terrible, so I'll give it a medium smiley face, because it wasn't the worst thing I've heard yet. And then the next album that I listened to is Shadow Work by Trapt. That's a weird-ass name to call a band. Now, he didn't actually give this album a review, I think, because he probably just despised it so much. He put it on as the 2nd worst album of 2020. So I had to listen to it. It's very similar to Father of All, but it sounds more redneck. It's bland, it's lazy, it's just boring rock music that your trucker uncle would just throw on while he's hitting a pedestrian. And I was listening to this, it just reminded me a lot of Dude Perfect. This is definitely worse than the album before, the Green Day one. And I would just give it a bad smiley face. It's really bad. And those were the 3 albums that I've listened to in the past few days. And I'm very excited for these next albums. Call 911 now! What's happening? It's probably been about a week because I've just been so focused on my university schoolwork and assessments, which were so hard and so boring. But I'm back and I've listened to another 3 albums. I don't know why I was struggling to do that. This is a point where these albums came out at about 2020. I'm doing all of these in chronological order of release. And 2020 was a bad year for many reasons, and I think the music reflects that. So the first album I listened to was DAYSTAR by Tory Lanez. Fantano said this was the worst album of 2020, which
is pretty bad. So basically the whole basis and subject matter of this album is that Tory Lanez shot Megan Thee Stallion, and throughout this whole album he's trying to be like, that wasn't me. So he's using the drama and the shooting that he did to get more attention and promotion to his album. It's genius. Now, besides that being the whole premise and basic subject matter of this album, the actual music itself is terrible. First of all, the censoring. He swears a lot on all the album, but he's decided to censor out all the swear words, and it sucks because all you hear is just like censored out swearing. Either swear or don't swear, okay? I don't want this weird, blurry in between. His voice is also really annoying. He's trying to push it as like high as he can, and it just does not work. A standout lyric to me was, my fuggy love me, give me cuddles, hold me snuggy. Yeah, that made me kind of want to throw up in my own mouth. And just a recap for the subject matter here, 99% is him not shooting Megan Thee Stallion, 0.5% is how good he is at having sex, and another 0.5% is how God's got his back. I can't make this up. This whole thing was the most unlistenable, like, garbage I have probably ever heard. It was honestly, just rethinking about it just gives me Vietnam flashbacks. Yeah, this is an awful smiley face. It was just awful. Well, at least it can't get worse than that. Famous last words from me. Tones and Eyes, welcome to the Madhouse. While I was listening to this album, I decided, hey, I'm gonna get into drawing because I've been drawing recently. I did a few when I was listening to the first albums on this list, and I was like, okay, I'll try to do some more drawing because it's a hobby that I really need to get back into. I'm working on this piece that I think it's really good, so I'll get back into that later. So Tones and I is the lady that made the Dance Monkey song, you know? Dance monkey, oh, 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 oh. Tones and I, if you copyright strike me for that, whoa, why I oughta. So this whole album is just very annoying pop music, which tries too hard to be, good. Don't know how to describe it, really. It really wants to be emotional and strong and powerful music for 40-year-old midlife crisis women. The songs Won't Sleep and Child's Play try really hard to be like creepy and Halloween kind of songs, but they fail miserably. I actually remember going into our local JB Hi-Fi and seeing this record, and I was like, damn, that's an ugly fucking album cover. And yeah, look at this album cover. It's really disturbing. She has like a pretty good voice. I think she has a good vocal range, but she just does really weird stuff with it. For example, on the song Dark Waters, the way she says, the only hold in me is a hand and head on both sides, is really strange. Listen to this. The only hold in me is a head and hands on both sides. She does weird vocal and like pitch changes throughout the album, which just throw you off and just sound bad. Yeah, mums on Facebook in their late 40s would absolutely love this shit. The production's very generic, it's slow and emotional, but it fails, and it's melancholic and sad, and it's just a big steaming shit. It's just really bad radio music, which is why I can kind of tolerate it because I've heard so much Ed Sheeran in my life. And the final song, she tries to rap, and it's absolutely disturbing. There's not much good about this album, but I think it's better than the Tory Lanez album, so I'm just gonna give it a bad smiley face and move on to X by Ken Carson. So I was trying to change my profile picture to something new because it had been this for like 3 years. So I took like 100 photos, and I was like, I need some music and I have to listen to 0 out of 10 albums for this video. So I put on X by Ken Carson. This album's so bad. Basically, Ken Carson is a Playboi Carti clone or ripoff, and he's just horrible. The beats are really bad and uninspiring. They kind of just looked up Playboi Carti type beat and found the worst one. There's also so much auto-tune on this album, like he cannot sing or rap for shit. So the subject matter for this album consists of him talking about his new bitch, in probably every song. Also, how much sex he's having and how he's so much cooler than you. And then some of the standout lyrics were, my fit matched my glizzy. That was That made me tear up. And I'm the shit like a turd. It's just a masterpiece, actually. He also sounds like he doesn't want to be there. Like this was an obligation. He had to get this album out. You Know Miles is better than this shit. Like I would rather listen to that any day. The only positive is that at least like it wasn't painfully bad. Like I've heard a lot of bad rap and I could manage this. This was a manageable album. It was terrible, but it still wasn't the worst thing I've ever heard. But what was funny is I listened to this whole album, took a bunch of photos for my new profile picture, and then ended up going, actually, why don't I just use an old baby photo of me instead? So that whole experience ended up being pointless, and I'm just gonna give this album a bad smiley face. 3 albums to go! Damn, who's that? Sexy beast. All right, this is the final 3 albums, and I am so goddamn happy. The first album I listened to was A Narrative Structure by Iced Earth, and you are gonna wanna sit back for this one. So Fantano didn't give this a 0, but he ranked it as the worst album of 2022, worse than the album X, which I just listened to, which he gave a 0. So I was writing like some notes down for all these albums, and what I was writing down for the first track was literally just some guy waffling, like he was just talking over this kind of dramatic rock beat that wasn't really going anywhere. And I was like, okay, it's a strange start to the album, but it wasn't, you know, horrible. But oh boy, I was... Because when I went over to the second track, the guy was still talking. Like, I'm dead serious, he just kept talking. It was the exact same tone, the exact same kind of instrumental beat, and it just... I was kind of starstruck, and I was like, this is a very weird start to the album. You know, it's gonna eventually transition into rock songs, you know, with like harmonies and real music. The whole album is just some guy waffling. The entire album, over an hour, is just this guy talking about the most insane nonsense you'll ever hear. It's like when you're in the back of an Uber and the Uber driver is just talking about the most insane shit you've ever heard in your entire life, and you're like, yeah man, pretty crazy. Like legit, this was just an hour of some guy yapping. I don't know what else to say. I was kind of just flabbergasted by how shit this was. This was the worst thing I've ever heard in my entire life. So yeah, this is a horrible album, and it deserves the worst of the worst review. But hey, at least the album cover's pretty cool. Next up, we have Vultures by Kanye West and Dolla $ign. Yeah! That was sarcasm. This is on the list because Fantano didn't give it a 0, but he couldn't even review it. He called this thing unreviewable. Like, he said it was unreviewable trash, so we never got a review for it. It could have been a 10, it could have been a 1, could have been a 0, you know? We don't know. All I know is he didn't like it, and I don't think he likes Kanye very much and the anti-Semitic messaging that he's been spewing in the last couple of years. So, I mean, it's understandable. What are you gonna do? He doesn't like Kanye. He doesn't like this album. I have a lot to say about this, so buckle up. First off, the production, coming from Kanye and all the amazing songs and albums he's produced, it's very underwhelming. Like, this shit's boring, it's kind of dried some spots, and it kind of goes on for a lot of the songs on this album. It's also not even like a solo Kanye album, it's a collab album with the rapper Dolla $ign, which honestly, he kind of carries the album for the most part. The song Talking features Kanye's daughter, Northwest, just like rambling. It's alright. My main issue is the songs are very repetitive and get very stale very quickly. Like, I was on my first listen and I was really sick of half of the songs. Now, I pulled some standout lyrics because these ones just really blew the balls off my penis. I'm never saying that again. Beautiful big titty but naked woman just don't fall out the sky, you know. Beautiful big titty but naked woman just don't fall out the sky, you know.
Just makes me tear up thinking about it.
Kanye honestly just sounds tired. He sounds like he's tired and he's just over it. I do like Dolla $ign's voice. I think his voice is really nice and he can hit a lot of good notes and melodies. So I think, yeah, he did a pretty good job. But overall, the album's just all over the place. It's very messy. It's not very put together, and it's just, it doesn't work as a consecutive piece. It's a bad smiley face. Like, it's not good. MGK and Trippie Redd's genre Sad Boy. So this EP or album, it's like half an hour, is just very annoying sad boy type music, which they fully lean into with this project. Trippie Redd's vocal harmonies are very over the top, pitched up, and sound like shit. MGK is also very like, his voice is low and he doesn't really care much. He sounds kind of tired too. Like, even if I was emo, I would still think this shit sucks ass. The subject matter too is just about drugs and sex, which is, whoa, never heard that stuff before. And I've also never done that stuff before. I am the way you're trying. Also, Jid's on here. I don't know how much they had to pay to get him to say 2 sentences. Probably a lot. The album overall, it's very bad, but it's bearable. You know, it's listenable. It's a bad smiley face for me. That's all the albums, and while I was listening to the final one, I finished up my drawing, and I gotta say, I think I'm pretty happy with it.